Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again on Friday. It is amazing Parashat. We have a double portion, Vayakel Pikuday. We also have Parashat Parah. And it's a very special Shabbat personally for my family. I have a bar mitzvah. My nephew's got a bar mitzvah. I'm going to be in Bat Ayin with the family. And we have special news in our family. My daughter Mirav, my sweetheart, was engaged this week to a very special guy named Ro'i. And as it gets closer, we'll talk more about our personal simcha, our happiness. And my son Ephraim this week was drafted in the Israeli Armed Forces, an elite unit. So we have a lot of things going on here in the Goldsmith family this week. So wow. But anyway, this week's portion, I want to dedicate this week's portion to someone very, very special, and that is my wonderful nephew Ephraim. I have another nephew. I have a son named Ephraim and a nephew named Ephraim, and he's in the Israeli Armed Forces right now, and he's a very, very special young man, very, very spiritual, good boy, a righteous individual, amazing young man, and so I want to dedicate this lesson to him, and hopefully if he does get a chance to look at this Torah lesson from the army, whatever, he'll get back to me, and hopefully he'll remember his uncle, and his uncle's thinking about him out there when he's right now in a special part of Israel, protecting the country. So Ephraim, this is dedicated to you, this lesson. What are we going to talk about? There's again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of things to talk about. But I want to focus now, to open up by focusing on a verse, and we'll see how things take us from there. The verse says like this: Vayavo kol ish, and again, a quick summary. We know Vayakel, after we discussed the previous portions about the tabernacle and all the different things that had to be brought to the tabernacle and how to do things, the actual bring it into fruition, bringing about the building of the tabernacle takes place in this week's portion. In Vayakel and Pikuday, which is a double portion, talks about the actual, as we say in Hebrew, bitzua, the actual bring it to fruition, doing it. We learned how to do it, and now actually doing it. And of course, this is after the sin of the golden calf, and Moshe Rabbeinu comes down again, after being up, receiving the second tablets, and they are full speed ahead over here. And we know the tabernacle was ordained or set up on the first day of the month of Nisan. And that gives us a little bit of background. And the verse is mentioned in the chapter 35, Vayakel, and verse number 21. It says like this: Vayavo kol ish asher nisa'o libo, and every person that his heart lifted him up, and the chol asher nedvar rucho, and every person that his spirit wanted to make him give a nedava, to give a contribution. Heviu et tumat Hashem, they brought the contribution of God for the building, lemelechet oel moed, for the building of the tabernacle, l'chol avodato, for all its work, ulevigdei kodesh, and for the holy clothes. Now, what I want to focus on here is first of all two words. It's very interesting that the verse talks about two different types of people coming to give their donations to the tabernacle. And what do they say? One of them is called asher nisa'o libo. Literally means his heart lifted him up. And the other one says nadvar rucho, which is spirit, his ruach, his spirit, pushed him to giving this contribution. So the question is, what is the difference between these two different kinds of givings? And if we look at one of the famous Jewish commentaries, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, he writes on the portion, he writes something very, very beautiful. And he writes something like this. And he says, Perush Omro, the explanation of this verse, Nisa'o libo nidava, dak yeshtei hadargot b'minadvim. There are two levels of those who contribute. One gives with the willingness of his heart, of his nafsho, of his nefesh, his soul, according to his ability, according to his financial situation, and that's the donation that he gives. That's called a nidava, a contribution. That's called nadvar rucho. what his spirit told him to give. Lishlol she'eino oseh davar kemo tzar b'nafsho. And this takes out or eliminates the person giving by causing pain or anguish to his soul. And the second kind of person who gives more than his ability, from the special, the great goodness of his heart, he gives beyond his capability. This is where it's called nisa'olibo. His heart lifted him up. Which means his heart lifts him up to bring him in a stage where beyond his financial situation, he gives beyond that. There's a very interesting outlook. There's Ochaim HaKadosh, a little bit, a few words just to expand on this a little bit. Of course, we all know about ourselves. Many people, of course, in this world, most people are very careful, very conservative, and they give something on the level of where, okay, we can handle it. We're not going to go beyond our capabilities. We don't want to cause any kind of trouble for ourselves, God forbid. And then there are those, of course, we know that are very, very unusual, special individuals that will go beyond their ability to turn the world around or to do more. They always want to do more, always want to do better. And that's why the verse says, Nisa'olibo, it first talks about the higher level. Nisa'olibo, in his heart, brings him up to give more, because that refers to the high level, which is mentioned first, and then the second level, which is nadvar rucho, which is the simple level of person giving according to his abilities. And this again is the Ochaim HaKadosh. If we look, there's an interesting explanation, a different one completely, which I found by Rav Vali. I mentioned many times Rav Moshe David Vali, a great scholar. He was, again, as I mentioned, he was together with the Ramchal, the famous Rav Moshe Chaim Litzato from Italy, who moved to Israel, to Akko, about 250 years ago. And this is the school of Kabbalistic school, very great giants. And he wrote a beautiful book. Rav Moshe David Vali was his student in Kabbalah, and he writes a beautiful. He wrote a beautiful work of many, many different Torah books on the entire Torah and all the Tanakh. And I like following him every week. And here I'd like to read his explanation. He says like this. He says, let me find the exact verse. Here we go. And he asked the question, what are these two different kinds of definitions the Torah uses? Two different kinds of givers. Every person whose heart lifted him up, and everyone who nadvarucho, which is spirit, gave him the power to give. He says a different explanation completely. He said there are two kinds of givers. There are those who give beteva, which is according to their nature, which means there are a lot of people who are natural givers. They're naturally inclined to be love and kind. It's a natural quality they have. They were born with that. And then there are those who give b'mikra. Mikra means by chance. Of course, here the word is not meant literally by chance. It means that it's not their. It's beyond their nature here. They give, but they give something. They go against. They're fighting against their nature of being more of not inclined to give. ונדיבים בטבע הם מראים את נדיבותם בכל ענייניהם, אם טובים ואם רעים, כי הוטבעו בכך והטבע מכריחם. He's saying that those who are natural inclined givers by their nature, they'll give in all situations, and whether good or bad, they're giving. This is their natural inclination. והנדיבים במקרה הם קמצנים לפי טבעם. And those who give, which is much harder for them to give, of course, they're the opposite. They have, they're like those who hold things for themselves and have a very hard, difficult time of parting with their financial issues and their financial blessing. It's hard for them to part with their money. But there comes a time when they have to overcome this need of hoarding and holding on to their money, whatever, and hoarding everything away, and actually break that and give. So So what really forces them to give is not their nature, their inner nature, but it's the time that says, okay, you guys got to give. So therefore the verse said, for those who give in a natural process, in a natural way, those who were inclined by their hearts, which means it's in their hearts, it's there. So the heart was always a kind heart, and they give. Now, when it comes time for actually Moshe Rabbeinu is calling for those to donate to the tabernacle, sure, it's very easy for them to come along and pop out their donation. But those who are the hoarders, and it's hard for them to part with their money, so now the time is giving them the hearts to want to give out give the donation, the fisha, because it's something that they're usually not. They're not obviously regular. They're not regular donors, and it's hard for them to give. But the time is forcing them to answer to the call of the hour. And that's what the verse, those whose their hearts incline them to give. Because they were like completely taken in by Moshe Rabbeinu's aura that was when he came down. And they really took hold upon themselves in order to overcome their kamtsanut. Kamtsanut meaning their quality of being hard to part with their money. Kamtsan is someone who hoards it all for himself. Okay, there's no doubt he said, there's no doubt, he's saying a very interesting thing, which we can think about, is that a person who has the opposite inclination, doesn't have a natural heart of giving, but he, at that moment, gets up and fights that urge of not to give, and he overcomes that. He has a great, great reward for Hashem, even greater than the person who's a natural thing for him to give. Because a person has to overcome, a lot of times we have to overcome our selfishness, we call our evil inclination, like a person who's a hard time parting with his materialism. Right? It's very, very difficult for a lot of people. But if they overcome that and they let the spiritual forces take over, we're doing something holy, we're doing a holy act of giving to the Beit HaMikdash, of giving to the tabernacle. That's an amazing thing. They're able to overcome their human instinct. Okay. Now he goes, therefore you'll see. Now he's getting something more in a Kabbalistic explanation. He's saying, you'll see the two words, milot nidava, nadva rucho, heim rashi tevot ner. If you take each first letter of each of the words, nadva rucho, nadva begins with the Hebrew letter nun. Rucho begins with the Hebrew letter resh. If you put nun and resh together, we get the word ner, candle in Hebrew. What is this hinting to? Le'omo shalta al elu sod haner. So we see on these people they had a special divine providence, a divine this ascension upon them, the divine, which is called ner, candle. Why? Shel klalut ha'kedusha lefi shemashlu b'rucham, because they had a very special. They reached a very spiritual level of holiness because they were able to get hold of their inclination of not to give, and they gave. In order to do God's will, which means, of course, this is amazing explanation. We're going to go on, and then we're going to summarize it. And the secret meaning behind it, the esoteric meaning behind it, is connected to the simple meaning. Why? Because a person who naturally is inclined to give, his vessel agrees with the light. Now, what does it mean, vessel and light? As we all know, the spirituality needs a vessel to rest upon, right? That's what as a human being, God gave us every human being, every creation has a vessel which maintains light. The light is the spiritual, which connects to the physical. Right? Somehow it's from all the way above in the spiritual world. we have this physical body of flesh. And in our human body, we have a spiritual soul which is connected upon us. So the soul, the spirituality, is really likened to the light of the candle. And the vessel is more of is what maintains that light, what holds that light. So there are spiritual vessels and spiritual lights. The vessels, we call them in the Kabbalistic term as sfirot. The famous sfirot are the actual vessels which hold the different lights. Lights are the different 5 different levels of the soul, which are nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, v'yichida. The 5 different spiritual lights. So he's saying that in a person who has a natural inclination of giving, his vessel is very, very like his light, because the vessel agrees. The vessel wants to accept it, wants to is the kind of person who wants to give, so it accepts what the spiritual direction is pushing him for. Despite the fact that a vessel usually limits, right? If we put water in a cup limits the amount of water that the cup can hold. And that's what it says, which is heart uplifted him. Because the heart, we know, is a vessel. Heart symbolizes the vessel of the spirit. Because within the heart, spirituality, we know, the upper worlds descends upon our hearts. So if his heart, the vessel, pushed him to want to give, surely, of course, the spiritual light, which comes from chesed, comes from the upper worlds of chesed, of kindness, is going to push him to give. But someone who's just giving because he's forcing himself and it's very difficult, he's overcoming, the opposite. The vessel does not want to give. He doesn't want to give. And here it says nadva. Why? Here it's the opposite. The power comes from the light. It's the light that the light that is pushing him to give. Which means the spiritual aspect is pushing upon him. This is now, of course, this is a very, very spiritual. Again, it seems like a very simple thing. Behind this is a tremendous principle of Jewish mysticism and the esoteric teachings, understanding the concept behind the vessel and the light. But putting on our simple terms, which is so clear, I think we can focus on that now. So we all know ourselves. We all know very, very hard in everything in our lives. We have a hard time to break our natural tendencies. Right? The teva, the natural tendency of a person is to say, okay, no, I'll just give the minimum, I'll do this. But to go ahead and go beyond that is what really makes a person. And he can actually take his natural tendencies and turn them around and do God's will in this world. That's really the important mission of a human being in this world, is to overcome our natural tendencies and go beyond and do better, do as much as we can. And this is, of course, a lesson for all of us, for every part of our lives. I just want to quickly, since this week is also Parashat Parah, which is a different topic completely, as we know, there are 4 portions that we read during this time, the month of Adar, and we read about Parashat Shkalim, about learning about the half a shekel, and we, of course, Parashat Zachor, remembering Amalek, which we read just a couple of weeks ago before Purim, and now here we are. We're reading Parashat Parah. We're reading the portion mentioned in the Parashat Chukat, which talks about the red heifer, and which all comes, of course, as we know, is to cleanse us from the uncleanliness of a dead person. And this comes out for now during Adar. It's very unusual to read. We know throughout the year, every Shabbat we read the portions of the week. Only if it's a holiday, the 3 holidays, or Purim, or Chanukah, or Rosh Chodesh, we have special readings of the Torah. But here, this week's portion, this particular time of year, is unusual that we have additional 4 portions that are read. And this week we're going to be reading about the red heifer. And the question is, why now? Why are we reading about the red heifer now? And the simple answer is that since we're preparing ourselves now for the Passover holiday, the Jewish people, of course, have to go in without being unclean when it comes to sacrifice, the Paschal sacrifice, and God willing, the temple will be rebuilt. Very soon, before Pesach, we can actually go ahead and sacrifice without being impure. Of course, the whole process of using the ashes of the red heifer and all that is a very, very complicated discussion. This is not the time for that right now, but I want to mention again one particular thing about it because it's very interesting. If we read about the red heifer, we also read, in addition to that, we read a portion in the prophets of Yecheskel, Ezekiel. And I want to read a few of these words and sort of connect it together. And what does the prophet say? The prophet, we go into the book of Yecheskel, chapter 36. And it says like this. I'm going to try to translate this and bring it down. Vayhi dvar Hashem elai lamo, and the words of Hashem came upon me. Here's the prophet Yecheskel saying, Ben Adam, son of man, Bet Yisrael yoshim al admatam, the Jewish people are sitting al admatam, in the land, Vayitamu ota bedakam ubalilotam, and they made her unclean by their actions. Kitumat anida, like the impurity of a woman who's a nida. Hayita dakam lefanei, was the way before me. Veshpoch hamati aleim al hadam asher shafchu al haaretz ubigduleim mitimur. He's saying, umigduleim timur, I will unleash my anger upon them, my wrath upon them, because of the blood that they spilled in the land and their uncleanliness, which is referring to the idol worship. V'afitzotam b'goyim, and I will scatter them amongst the nations. V'yizaru ba'aratzot, and be scattered amongst all of the nations. Kedakam uchalilotam shvatim, according to the ways I judge them. So we see here in the beginning of this portion of Yecheskel over here, what is he talking about? He's talking about a situation where the Jewish people were in the land of Israel, and because of our sins and our uncleanliness, God scattered us about the world, and He judged us. And we will live amongst the nations, and they will disgrace my name. God is right now saying it's a disgrace of His name when the Jewish people are scattered amongst the world. Terrible disgrace. Because they're going to say, hey, look, this is God's people. What are they doing outside the land? Here's God's people, and they're outside the land of Israel. How could they be out there? And I will have mercy upon my name, God says. And God says, not because of you, because of my name that you disgrace amongst the nations, which you came there. And I'll make my name great. And how is God going to make His name great? Holy, how will God make His name known in the world and sanctify His name? I will take you amongst the nations of the world, and I will gather you up, and I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Which means, here we are, that because of our sins we were scattered amongst the world, and we were disgracing God's name because the nations were saying, look at the Jewish people, what are they doing out here? They should be in the land of Israel, living in Israel. And God says, because of the terrible disgrace you made, the Chilul Hashem you made amongst the nations, I will now change all that, and I'll bring you back to the land of Israel. I'll bring you back to the land. And I will throw upon you holy water, and I will make you pure. From all your uncleanliness, from all your idols, I will cleanse you. And I'll give you a new heart, the ruach chadasha, a new spirit. I'll place within you. And here, what I want to connect, as you can think about now, we just spoke about a spirit and a heart. And here, which means, and I will take away the heart of stone. Because God is saying, I will take away this vessel of stone. And I'll give you a heart of flesh. And I'll place my spirit upon you. My ruchi, I mentioned before, we're just connecting what we just spoke about before. I will give my light upon you. Right? His spirit upon us. And you will live in the land as I gave to your forefathers. And you will be my nation. And I will be your God again. And I will cleanse, I will save you from all the uncleanliness. And then God goes on to give the blessing, and then you'll see the land will come to life. Of course, I'm not going to read the whole thing now because we're getting late here on this portion, but we have to continue this lesson. What I wanted to bring out, first of all, So this week's portion I mentioned is we're reading about the red heifer, etc. And here all of a sudden we read in the Haftarah, as we have a custom to read, parallel to what we read is also from the prophets. And the question is, what is this connection between the red heifer with this particular portion that we're reading from the prophets? And the answer seems to be very, very clear. Because when the Jewish people are out there amongst the world of the nations, this is likened to the uncleanliness of death. The Jewish nation without the land of Israel is like a dead nation. And that's what really nations thought of us. Those who believe in replacement theology actually went out and said, we're replacing you and there's no more Jewish people. But here we see, no, God for his name's sake is taking the Jewish people back to the land of Israel, which has happened already, and we've returned to the land, and now we're in a process of growing, and God will put upon us, of course, and cleanse us from this terrible exile. So exile represents death. And coming back to the land of Israel is the land of life. For the Jewish people, the exile is death. Because our land is the land of Israel. And of course, in the land of Israel, God places abundance upon us and blessed us and cleansed us. And as I speak to you, it's pouring rain here and hail is coming down. And that's a good sign, of course. A blessing of God's bounty in the land of Israel. The land of Israel is coming to life. It's exactly the whole thing of the red heifer. Death, of course, is this uncleanliness. We have to purify ourselves. And everything, of course, is more than anything is spiritually. Of course, there's a physical impurity as well, because we can't do things if we're impure. We can't sacrifice a Passover offering. And of course, it all begins in a spiritual cleansing. That's why the nation has to go through this whole process of cleansing and returning back to the land of Israel. This is now happening now here. And then after that, we will have the spiritual cleansing. And in Bezat Hashem, once we completely become a nation of worshiping Hashem the way we're supposed to, very soon in our time we'll see the building of the temple, and we'll see big changes going on over here. And this is all hinted within the red heifer. And this is, of course, at this time of year, because not only getting ready for the Passover, and we know for the holiday of Purim is redemption to redemption, why they connected Purim and Pesach. So we are really in a very special spiritual time period. This is a very, very ripe time for us to purify ourselves in our hearts. And what I open with, of two kinds of givers, those who give in a natural, wonderful, those who have a natural tendency to give, it's fantastic. And without, God forbid, putting them down anyway. But those who have a difficulty of giving, and a difficulty, they have to work harder on themselves. And those who even give something, they should work harder to give more, to overcome this uncleanliness, because it's uncleanliness. We are inclined to not to do something which is right. It's some kind of, that's the source of the Yetzer Hara. The evil urge is holding us back from being completely connected to Hashem and doing the right thing in this world. And that's all as we see here. Coming back to the land of Israel, God giving us a new spirit and a new heart. We're cleansing ourselves, we're rebuilding our vessels, and we'll receive tremendous, of course, bounty, spiritual energy from Hashem, the more we improve and better ourselves in this world. Well, have a wonderful Shabbat, and we will be in touch very, very soon. Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, Yeshuot V'Nechamot.